All right. So we'll give it just a second here. Welcome, everybody. We're about to get started. I always like to start just about a minute over so we can let people trickle in, but really excited for today's show. Just give it just a minute and we will kick things off. By the way, if you're out there, feel free to use the chat function to the right and introduce yourself. Um, let's see. I'm going to use it right now. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the show. Cool. All right, let's get started. Welcome to AWE Nite SF. This is our very first event of 2024, where we'll be sitting down with Tom Emrich and Amy LaMeyer to dive deep into Tom's annual trends and insights around all things immersive. I'm Patrick Johnson, co-organizer of AWE Nite SF and CEO of Rock Paper Reality. All right, I see people coming into the comments. That's exactly what I wanted to see. So now that we're getting familiar with it, for those of you out there, how many of you have been to an AWE Nite SF event before? Hey, Oakland. All right. I actually moved from Oakland 4 years ago and now living in Scotland, but go back and forth between here and California. Welcome, welcome. Hello, Joseph. All right. So people are getting familiar with the chat. This is going to come in handy because you're definitely going to want to be dropping your comments into the chat function as the show goes on. There will be 10 minutes at the end that we are going to save for Q&A. I'm going to be collecting the questions as we go along, so please drop them in there and we'll have time for some Q&A with Tom and Amy. Okay, so kicking things off real quick, just some of the housekeeping. For those who aren't in the know, AWE Nite SF is part of the Greater Augmented World Expo family and is the world's #1 spatial computing event series and supports 30 independently run AWE Nites around the world. So if you are living in or near any of these little red dots around the map, reach out. We'll get you connected. It's awesome to support. And thank you, Justin. All right, and let's go ahead and move along here. So AWE Nite SF is actually part of AWE, which is the Augmented World Expo. If you haven't been to one of the in-person shows, I go every year and have been going for probably the last 10 years to the AWE show in California. It in the past has been at Santa Clara Convention Center, but this year it's in Long Beach on June 18th, which I'm pretty excited about because I've always driven through Long Beach, never actually stopped or had a reason to, but now I definitely do. So I highly recommend getting your tickets now. We've got the early bird specials going. And there's also AWE Asia and AWE EU, if that is closer to you. Finally, you can access some pretty cool courses. If I don't say so myself, me and one of my colleagues, we created a WebAR workshop that is a 2-day workshop that you can access on awexr.com. It's got a lot of great information on there about launching WebAR experiences for brands and marketing. And if you're in the market for fundraising and an XR startup, you can also access the AWE Academy startup course. All right, so that's it from me. But before we begin, let's just do a quick round of intros in case you have been living under a rock. Tom Emrich is Director of Product and Augmented Reality Platforms at Niantic and has been driving innovation and growth in spatial computing for 15 years. And originally kickstarted AWE Nite SF and brought me into the fold about 5 years ago. So thank you, Tom, for that. And it's still going strong. And Amy is managing partner at WXR Fund and a longtime expert in immersive tech investment. All right, y'all. I'd like to welcome back the original AWE Nite SF duo, Tom Emrich and Amy LaMeyer. Welcome to the virtual stage.
Thank you, Patrick. Good to be here, Amy. I can't believe that we're back here. It's a year already since we last chatted about the space. It feels like so much has changed.
So much has changed, and if we look back 3 years to when we first started doing this, it's even more. So, yeah, glad to be back. Glad to share this with everybody that's joining today.
Yeah, and it's so good to be here at Nite SF, and can't wait to be in LA. It's going to be so warm for AWE USA this year. So hopefully we're going to have some pool time, which is, also an AWE tradition.
Yeah, really exciting that it's going to be in a new venue with so much more capacity. I'm looking forward to it too.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you about trends. Every year I take some time to jot down my thoughts, and I'm eager to hear, how you feel about them and also what your thoughts are on the space, especially as we're now, a month into 2024. I will say before we begin, as Patrick mentioned, I am the director of product at Niantic, but this post is really an independent piece. So I just want to say that at the top as we have this discussion about spatial computing and augmented reality. But where do you think we should begin?
Well, first of all, I just want to give a shout out to the post. For anybody that hasn't seen it, go to LinkedIn or, whatever your preferred web browser is and search for Tom Emrich 24 in 2024. And it's a great read. It's long, but it is, as you say, grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine or whatever. And, it's a fantastic read every year. I went through earlier today and picked out a couple of my favorite points. So maybe we start with that. And then, again, we're going to shift to the crowd later. So for anybody that has any specific questions, make sure you put it in the chat. Number one is always a good one to start with. And this year you talked about how that, AR is going to replace Gen AI at the top of the hype cycle. Yeah. And I actually agree with that. I don't think AI will go away, but it's definitely, and I think investment in AI, and we can talk about that later, will continue to exceed investment in AR, but I do think it's going to be more hyped. Yeah. So I agree with you on that. So maybe talk a little bit about what your thoughts there.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that we're starting off with agreement. Let's see where we disagree as the hour goes on. Every year it seems as though industry and media has attention for one, technology darling. And that typically sits at the peak, the tippy top of the Gartner hype cycle. I think we'd all agree that last year that was Gen AI. Knowing that the Apple Vision Pro was launching this year and just like understanding the terminology that Apple particularly was using, I really started off the post by indicating that I felt like spatial computing would dominate.
Right.
The conversation, and we're already seeing that. I think like folks on the call would agree that spatial computing as a term, as a topic, has really engulfed media industry conversations. And so I think this trend is already starting to come together. I love your point about AI not going away. And in fact, now that we're in February and we're starting to see how things are turning out, it is very evident that AI continues to be a very dominant trend, tech trend and tech focus. And so unlike previous years where like it was metaverse and then metaverse gave up its crown to Gen AI and Gen AI kind of really almost like removed metaverse conversations, this year it seems as though like there are two main topics that we're kind of going back and forth with, and that is AI and spatial computing. And I think that the reason for that is because both of these are very transformational technologies, but also, as you know, AI underpins spatial computing. So there's this relationship there. So I think that's quite nice. And the other thing is, like, the hype cycle really reflects, in my mind, like what is dominating the conversation, what's taking up a lot of space, what's on people's mind. But as you pointed out, this does not mean that these technologies stop. Like the metaverse activities have continued, Gen AI activities continue. And it also doesn't mean that this is the time of which the top hype cycle technology is adopted at wide scale. It's actually just the kickoff in many ways.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think this is all coming together as I kind of saw as I put the post together. It'll be interesting to see what people think in the comments, because I'm sure that there may be some differing opinions.
Yeah. Good idea to clarify hype cycle, and just, it's what people are talking about, not necessarily adoption or investment or things like that. That's a little bit broader. The second one is actually an interesting one as well, and somewhat related. And that was that HMDs are dead and long live MR.
Yeah, this is like me trying to be a little controversial, but I think we could agree that moving forward, headsets will now be mixed reality headsets. And now that VR headsets have the capacity to double with augmented reality capabilities, with what we saw with MetaQuest 3 last year, now with Vision Pro, we've learned, it's been publicly rumored / announced that others are joining the fray, like Google, Sony already announced at CES.
Yeah.
This trend, I really just wanted to shine a huge spotlight on the fact that VR is changing. These headsets are changing, and they're no longer doing one type of reality. And that going forward, the default is that movement that I think we were all waiting for, of moving through augmented reality and virtual reality, and really unifying what has always been two sides of the same coin. And I think that's really exciting in our industry, because many people believe that, but there are also camps where, there was VR camps and AR camps, and we were kind of working in silos-ish. And I think now it's nice to see the community at large come together and understand how we could work together more, and also play within these two realities on the same device. And so I think that's quite exciting.
I almost think about it a little bit, in some instances as VR being a filter, right? Like if you think about something like Tribe, where you're learning how to DJ in VR, you can do it in your home. I could do it here, or I could like transport myself into another place. And I think having that option of being immersed versus being able to be in the space that you're at, but interacting digitally, I think having that option is really exciting and inspiring. And so I'm glad that this trend is happening. But I also think that there will always be a need for immersion, like full immersion, virtual reality immersion. If you really want to just need to transport to a completely different reality or be totally embodied, or embodiment can cross. But if I think about something like Embodied Labs, for example, they want to put someone in a completely immersed space to be able to completely control all the parameters around a training session on how to treat the elderly and deal with and connect with seniors. So there are still instances, I guess is my point, where you'd still want a completely immersed situation, but I'm glad that there's the option.
Yeah, I like that.
The single headset.
And I think I know that you're involved with Shapes XR, and that was one of my first experiences with the MetaQuest 3. And if you haven't tried this creation tool, a prototyping tool, design tool for mixed reality, I do suggest folks on the call give it a shot. And the reason is they did a really good job of mixed reality content creation, where you're in your space, you're creating, and they played a lot with scale. And so you could, adjust your model, adjust your scene, and then opt to actually jump in at full scale, into that environment that you just created, that scenario that you just created, and therefore you're in VR. And so I'm really excited about, again, that unification, where it's not an AR versus VR. It's what is the best experience for the user? What's going to deliver the best value for the user? And in some cases, you don't want to see a reality, as you're pointing out. You need to be completely somewhere else. Or you need to be like, you want to get that different perspective, that different viewpoint. But also what I'm finding is that things that may have just been little hello worlds in VR, because it's a fully simulated environment, get a new breath of fresh air when you start to see it, the virtual object interact with the physical world. And so, case in point, we were talking earlier about how there's a lot of confetti apps, and confetti cannon apps on Vision Pro right now. And if you imagine like confetti cannon in VR going off, it's cool, but there's so much more you can do in VR. But there's something to be said when you place that same confetti cannon in your space, and then the confetti, lands on your table and your lamp and around your space. It feels much more magical. And so I think that's a good example of, again, just like the experience, the value, the perception, and how it changes with differing realities. And it's exciting that we have a device that lets us play with both. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is nice. I'm going to use one more example before we jump on, because now I'm inspired to talk about it. But Tonandi in Magic Leap, right? And an MR headset where you're listening to Sigur Rós, and there's a whole bunch of flora and fauna growing, like using your space to do that, right? I'll just never forget that experience. But at the same time, if you look at something like Fatboy Slim in Engage in VR, like it really needed to be in VR. So the fact that we can have now both of those types of experiences with a single headset is so great.
Yes, I agree. And it also, I think, is giving,
that way, at least.
It's giving augmented reality and also like a new type of platform to play on. Of course, in the consumer sphere, I should add. And so, mobile really was and continues to be the dominant device to allow for as many consumers as possible to engage with augmented reality. But I think what really has happened this year is we're starting to see a category come together, that's available to consumers at varying price points, that allows for you to create augmented reality experiences that are hands-free, heads up, wider field of view, and with robust spatial awareness, capabilities. And so this is what's also really exciting from an augmented reality standpoint.
Yeah.
So speaking of various price points, I'd like to dig into, news of the month, which is Apple Vision Pro. And I know you've had a chance to use it a little bit, which is great. And I'm looking forward to that. But one of your points in the trends talked about more natural interactions with voice and gaze. And let's talk about, you wrote that before you had tried the Apple Vision Pro. Do you still agree with that? How does that shift? How does your opinion on that point shift? Is it just validated? What's your thought?
Well, my thought is that with every new wave of computing tends to come like a new user experience paradigm. One thing that I have been raising up is just my viewpoint that this current mixed reality category is much more akin to a PC kind of era of this category than it is the smartphone, for example. And so if you recall back to when Apple launched the Macintosh, they were really instrumental in not just bringing personal computing to people, but also this is when the mouse was introduced to folks. And so thinking about like how we use a mouse today and how it's such an extension of our hand and how it allows for us to interact with, the digital world behind a screen. it's quite exciting to then think, like, what is the mouse then for spatial computing? If spatial computing now has different sensors and different content that drives different needs, and I don't think this was a hard trend to identify, because eye tracking, hand tracking has been in use in different devices, and in fact, the first time I've experienced a very magical moment with eye tracking was on the HoloLens 2. I remember like looking at a screen that had a lot of copy, and then looking down and it scrolled, and it took my breath away, because I was like, what just happened here? It literally felt like magic. And so, fast forward to today, the Apple Vision Pro, of course, not shipping with controllers, which is like a very big deal, and asking users to do something that is actually natural for us in the real world to an extent, but very new for us in the digital world, which is use your hands, use your eyes, look and tap, look and tap, hold, and scroll, or the various other interactions. And so I think what's exciting is that we're just getting started, and this is really a great time to be a designer in this space, because you're going to be helping to set the tone for some of the standards that we're going to be using. If you think about, pinch and zoom on the smartphone, right? Tap and swipe, like these are things that we use on a regular basis. So the dust will start to settle on what these natural interactions will be for mixed reality.
And there's been so much, I mean, people have been working on this obviously for decades, but, particularly in the last 8 years, let's say, since the latest era of headsets. But to your point with controllers, right? Almost always controllers. Meta's, gone a little bit away from that, but just to see the Apple Vision Pro to be released without controllers at all, I think was, for me, because I'm really looking forward to that really natural and fluid interaction between the digital and the physical, was exciting. And also, I'm not a digital video gamer, so controllers were awkward for me. They were never natural. So I'm excited about use of gaze and that the easier use of hands, right? Like instead of being up here with the HoloLens, you're down below. And in particular voice. So I'd really like to see the voice interactions get better as the later version of headsets come out.
Yeah, and that has a lot to do with AI, which we talked about at the top. I think it's really interesting what you said about games, because if you remember back in the mobile, like early times, like there was no tactile keyboard, and there was no joystick. There is no mouse. And so there is no like a game console controller, but yet an entire gaming industry was built around mobile. And these new interactions at the time of mobile, of tapping on the screen and like, pinching and zooming and swiping. And I feel like this is what's happening now in the spatial computing era is, yes, controllers exist, and we're seeing some fantastic controller-based experiences on MetaQuest 3. And, we have another a device in the same category that's challenging developers who are used to controllers and say, now build a game as if you didn't have controllers and you just had hands and you just had voice and you just had, gaze. And these constraints, I think, are going to be something that will produce some net new types of experiences that we may not have seen before. And that's kind of exciting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you. And, these are just a few of ways in which I believe that we're going to be interacting on these devices. If you watched Mark Zuckerberg's video on Instagram, where he reviewed the Apple Vision Pro experience, he alluded to like the use of EMG, which is often called brain sensing technology, as something that could in the very near future come into the fray. And so I think this will just get more and more intuitive. And as you pointed out, especially thanks to machine learning and LLMs and the like, we're going to also see the performance, really kick in.
Yeah, the
cool.
brain sensing is really interesting. You know, you look at companies like Helium that have been out there for, you know, at least 6-7 years. You know, they're a wellness app, and if they're not on Vision Pro now, they've definitely been a part of the Apple Vision Pro announcements, as being part of the launch. But you know, they've been using brain sensing technology since then to help you know, reduce stress and bring focus and productivity. So really interesting. You know, I can't remember if this is one of your top 24, but you know, obviously, as we start looking at giving these devices more of our more information, we definitely want to be aware of, both as developers and product managers, but also as users and investors, what the companies are doing with the data, right?
Yeah.
And so
I definitely agree.
that's a really important thing to keep an eye on, as you know, like you're saying, it's still early days on how these things are being developed and what's happening with the data that's being captured. So
yeah, that's very fair. And I know you're a member of the XR Guild that is very focused on the ethics within the XR space, and certainly, you know, privacy, security, safety needs to continue to be top of mind, especially in these early formative years of these new devices. I would say that we're seeing that both of the major players in this space are like limiting things like raw camera access, for example, in order to you know, move in the direction of providing that privacy and making sure that things are, you know, not being recorded or collected unnecessarily. And so, you know, I think this is top of mind for the platforms, and certainly it's our responsibility for those in the industry to keep that top of mind in anything we build and champion. So I agree with you. On your side, I know like you're not only invested in a number of solutions, as you pointed out, but you talk to a lot of startups, and so like what has been their reaction to the MR category of headsets?
there's excitement on the one hand, again, for a lot of the reasons that we've already discussed, and also some hesitation of, you know, with the price point of the, you know, Apple Vision Pro being, you know, $3,500 to $5,000, depending on how much you buy, and taxes and shipping and all the things. You know, just a concern that there isn't enough, there won't be enough users with this first release for them to actually go into it now. So a lot of people saying, okay, I want to know what this is. I'm going to plan for it. I'm going to watch what Apple's doing, but may not focus on releasing content until later versions. But certainly excited about having a major hardware player like Apple in the ecosystem.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, I feel the developer excitement, and I'm excited for the developers. And I think what's also really interesting about having now two major headsets in a category is that that means that the growth and adoption of two headsets equals the sum opportunity for investors and developers. And so certainly, you know, MetaQuest has a head start and has steadily grown in users over time, from, you know, their VR days to now MR days. And so now we have a category that's come together that will most likely have a couple more headset players enter the fray. And this is only going to increase the size of opportunity for brands, organizations, developers, investors. And so I think there's something to be said there.
Yeah, and just thinking more spatially, right? How do we create? How is content created? You know, talking about doing that content creation in Shapes or whatever other tools, so that we're interacting with content on that in that 3D level versus the flat level. I'm going to say it again because I'm going to keep saying it until it actually is true. But you know, I really think the pivot point for headsets continues to be when cost, comfort, and content come together, right? And Tom, you've heard me say this a million times, but we might as well get it on this year's as well. You know, when something is usable and comfortable for a long period of time, and it is affordable by many people, and the content is interesting and either from an entertainment perspective or from a usefulness perspective, like that is the moment that everybody will start to shift and need to have one. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but we are getting closer than we ever have been. So that's exciting.
That is exciting. I want to just tell like a little story. So I have been spending a lot of time in the Apple Vision Pro, and you're able to screen mirror using an app called Bezel your phone into the space, which is actually quite helpful. But I've only had the device for now, like 2 weeks, but it really speaks to how quickly you can form behaviors with the device, because I would look at the screen and try to use my eyes and my fingers to try to scroll through the mirrored screen of at the time actually it was TikTok, and TikTok just announced their official app. But obviously, the mechanism was you had to actually use still your phone because you're just screen mirroring. It's not an emulator.
Right.
But I just like having caught myself immediately want to use, the gaze and hand system as like the default, I think speaks to just how natural that is. And in fact, I would say that sometimes I wake up and I kind of expect a little bit of my, app menu to be somewhere in my house when I'm not wearing my Vision Pro. And so I think to your point about like starting to think spatial, starting to think 3D, what's also really interesting is that we have these devices in the wild, and the more they get used, the more we're also going to start to see play out just like how this changes us as humans. How does this change our thinking? What new ideas will we have? New inspiration will we have? And so that's kind of exciting all on its own.
Yes, I agree. I'm going to jump around a little bit. One of the ones at the very end, I think it was number 21 on your list, was spatial computers give us a glimpse into the future of work. So now that you've had the Vision Pro for 10 days or whatever it's been, can you imagine using it more for work?
Yes, I do. I do a lot of writing in the Vision Pro. I do a lot of emails in the Vision Pro. If you're on my LinkedIn and you may have seen me respond to a comment in the past 2 weeks, that was done via my Vision Pro. And I think both Meta and Apple are wisely focused on work. And so there's a lot of different opportunities for work. One is like infinite monitors and just like having large screens, lots of screens. The other is like, a new form of communication, like telepresence, that makes it feel like me and you are more in the same room than what we are right now on Zoom. And then another bucket is like productivity collaboration apps like ShapesXR, which is a really good example. Mm-hmm. And I think both of them do a really good job of all three. That being said, the resolution on the Vision Pro is a standout, and it really does make a big difference in your ability to read what's on the screen. Mm-hmm. Very akin to if you've ever tried the Vario device, which is a very high-end device that was really well suited for simulation, which actually is another use case in work, because you could actually read dashboards and labels on buttons. So yes, I do find myself like about an hour and a half, 2 hours a day jumping in. And I think like the repeat use case for me currently is, outside of being, obsessed with trying to find new spatial apps, is looking at my Mac, seeing the connect button, connecting my Mac, and then having like this large screen in front of me, while I'm sitting on my couch, or like if I'm just in bed before I go to bed, rather than my 13-inch Mac AirBook screen. It's this massive screen that, maybe it's my old eyes. It just feels a little bit easier. So I love it.
Well, and also they have your head up, right?
Yes, true.
Looking down, right? I love the concept that it'll be up and out, and movable, infinitely movable. How much have you been using it for meetings, right? Like I've done FaceTime with a couple folks and been on Zoom calls with some people that have been in the headset. So literally interacting with their avatars. Have you branched into that yet?
I have not, because the first day when I unboxed it, I created my persona and I was horrified. And so I have not yet taken the time, not because the personas were bad, by the way, just because my hair and just like the lighting. So it had nothing to do with Apple. I just haven't taken the time to redo my persona, but I have seen a lot of people, leverage it for this. What was your experience like? I know you've had more,
It was pretty
calls.
uncanny. Like definitely, definitely uncanny valley, but it was one of those things where we get used to things so quickly. So the first 30 seconds or 3 minutes, my system was almost in a little bit of shock. This is weird. What's going on? I can't, like, I know you, but I don't know you kind of concept. And then we get used to it, right? Like humans are really adaptable. So I think I could get used to it over time. And then I was in with another person and their avatar was closer to what they actually looked like. So it was a little less uncanny. And that was, except their hair. Hair is hard.
Hair is hard.
We all need to wear hats or something. So that was easier for me. But a little bit strange being on a flat Zoom call talking to an avatar when, like, in my head, I know it could be like, if I was in a headset, it could be 3-dimensional and spatial. But I'm interested in it. I'm really interested in volumetric and how we'll do meetings in the future that way. And I'm really excited about it and looking forward to it. So I'm glad there's some progress in this space.
And we've had experience with this in a way, in a different type of reality with like alt space and meetups. Even this meetup, especially during the pandemic, was held in alt space. One of our talks like this was in alt space. And so I think that's the spirit of it, is like, I've always said the killer app of XR or AR VR is presence. And it's about making this feel like we have more a sense of presence, not just me and you, but also the audience that has joined. And I think that's what these devices are striving for. These solutions are striving for. And then the other thing that I really admire is really like looking out for cross-device, cross-platform capabilities in order to not isolate the headset user from the rest of the device ecosystem. And both Meta and Apple have done a good job of this via like Zoom or Teams. And so like what we're seeing really well here with FaceTime is, as you pointed out, is like you can be in a headset, but you're able to call every mobile, every iPhone user, and vice versa. And that is, I think, a real secret ingredient to use and adoption of these headsets, especially if you think about them like early PCs, where there's like one per household. They're staying inside, like they're definitely seeing value from mom, dad, and kids. But you're going to need these like. They need to interact with the rest of the device ecosystem that's in play in order to be enriched. So it's cool. You got to see a lot of personas. I'm happy that you had that chance.
I mean, we should say rest in peace to AltSpace, but also the news yesterday of Mozilla Hubs not being supported anymore. So it'll be interesting to see how these virtual spaces continue to morph over time. Whether or not Horizons takes off, whether or not Apple creates a space like that. I'm kind of interested to see.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I want to just say big thanks to the Mozilla team and for Mozilla for their commitment to really pushing the spatial web. I think Hubs will look back and see that it was ahead of its time. And certainly, the browser can be very capable of powerful VR in particular, and also AR capabilities. And so I hope that we see more Hubs-like experiences over time. I agree with that entirely.
Me too. All right, we've got about 5 minutes before we're going to start taking questions. So if people want to get their questions in, please put them in the chat. We're excited to hear what you guys have to say. Tom, the last one I had highlighted was the integration of AI helping to accelerate development for spatial computing. So maybe do you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing there, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, I think this is like a continued trend that we already started seeing from last year. One thing I'll point out, we have a couple buckets, right? So we have AI Copilot or AI supercharging, creation, where now it's just making it easier to code, on its way to like what you say is what you get, kind of like experiences. You have generative media, like whether that be video, which, there was a big announcement from OpenAI today,
Right.
or GIFs or images or even 3D. And then you have the use of, AI and ML to like further, content creation around scanning and like, things like Smurf and Nerf and Gaussian splats, is another kind of like area that I think you could focus on. One thing that I will say, like having broken down just some of that landscape, is I've been so impressed at how quickly generative 3D has come. We saw papers last year, and then papers became alphas. We had like Luma launch Genie last year. Masterpiece Studios launched their generator, and those are just to name a few. And so, why is this important? Well, as you pointed out, it's all about 3D, and you're not able to really create very compelling immersive experiences without 3D content. And so between these new scanning capabilities that are really making it easy for you to capture the world and replicate the world as a digital twin to bring into immersive experiences, and like the growing evolution of generative 3D media, it'll reach a point where we can democratize 3D content creation to more and more users, eventually to the point where it's like TikTok and Instagram have done with video. That's the path that we're on. It's a longer journey, but you can see that starting to come together. In the beginning, it'll just be the developers and the creators that have already started to master these, just like be able to work faster, And so that's really, I think, like quite exciting, and really shows how these technologies like AI is not in competition with spatial computing, that's in competition with AR and competition with VR. It's not that the case at all. In fact, they're all pretty much represent the next wave of computing, as you know, because you've been watching AI in particular for so long. So what are you seeing in way of this and these trends?
Yeah. I mean, to your point, our fund is always invested in spatial computing and AI from, back in 2019. So we've been planning, we've been watching this space integrate with each other for several years now. I saw a video yesterday on Vox about just the acceleration of the creation of content in movies, like the backdrop parts of movies. So if anyone's interested in that space, it's a really great video. But the guy that was doing it, they talked about how it used to be painted on glass and then it moved to digital, but it was still flat. And now, just the growth in three-dimensional content creation. And you could just see the joy in his eyes of how much easier it is to create now and how much money it saves. And that was it's really fun to see someone that knows the space, see their problems get solved. Be able to create more content in a shorter period of time. And like you said, it's going to help people that, maybe aren't experts start to create content where they couldn't have before, right? Like the difference between making a website in the early days of the internet to, now almost anyone can go on Squarespace and create a website. So
yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that.
And it also is really going to help with not necessarily like completely removing the artistry that is involved, but instead, I think like helping to rapidly prototype and ideate, and also get that buy-in in order to unlock and convince investors and producers to say yes to more things is kind of what I think could potentially happen. And that way, I really do hope that this leads to more work for artists, more work for 3D modelers and developers and content creators, film producers, VFX artists. And so, I think we're probably in this time when there's these new tools, and there's also a little bit of figuring out how they are going to fit into our existing workflows to enhance and supercharge, we'll see how that all comes together.
Yeah. It's an exciting time for sure. Are there any of the trends that you wanted to point out, or Patrick, if you're ready, we can start doing questions anytime.
I think we did a good smattering. I'm seeing like very active conversation in the chat, and I love that.
Yeah. I know it's great to see the activity, because there's nothing sadder than a chat for questions and there's cricket. So let's dive in. Thank you both for the conversation so far. Already a lot of insights into Vision Pro, which I'm very excited to get my hands on, and it's just making me even more anxious to be able to try it myself. But let's start with Justin Q had a question around what might be the spatial equivalent of Minesweeper or Hearts to help train people in new spatial computing input mechanisms.
Well, funnily enough, Hearts is on the Apple Vision Pro as an arcade game. So if you want to play it, Hearts is Hearts is kind of the answer, Justin. Let me think what I played. I mean, Cut the Rope actually does a really good job of walking through how to use your hands as part of its onboarding tutorial from what I've seen. But I'm going to switch gears a little bit on like the equivalent for spatial computing input on the AVP to talk about close encounters on the MetaQuest 3, which is the hello world that you can play in mixed reality. In my mind, that was such a brilliant way to acclimate users to the value of mixed reality. So I'm kind of adjacently answering your question here, Justin. It does use controllers, but it was such a short and well understood experience that uses your room. It has like a little spaceship that lands in your room from the ceiling, and then you start to use your laser guns as your controllers to start to break your own walls down, so that it is a good interplay between mixed reality, pieces of the wall in your space, and that portal to virtual reality. So I'm really excited about that as like a first experience for many people on the MetaQuest 3 to really be introduced to, very immersive, mixed reality in its true form, like AR, VR like content. How about you, Amy?
I thought interesting, like almost a storytelling type of way of learning how to interact with controllers, I think is interesting. The other thing that I can imagine, which, well, we'll see, is a personalized AI type. Like, I wish I had that to help me learn how to use a new device. I'm kind of interested in that. It could be borderline clippy, and we all worry about that. But as AI grows, I am more and more interested in what a personal AI assistant could be. So doesn't exist now, but like here's me thinking about the future, because
I love that.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. By the way, I misspoke. It's called First Encounters. Close Encounters is a movie, so I apologize.
Right.
First Encounters.
First Encounters. Yeah, that makes sense.
But one more thing is, if you recall back when Apple launched the iPhone, there were like huge campaigns on pinch and zoom, because remember the web was a full web, and so to read the New York Times, you actually had to pinch and zoom to read the New York Times.
That's right.
And so I actually feel like when you're on the Vision Pro, like just your first use, number one, in order for you to calibrate your eyes and your hands, they walk you through an actual experience where you need to look at dots, and then you look at the dot and tap, look at the dot and tap with your hands. Right. After you do that, you already know what to do, is kind of like the answer. And so, they've done a good job on their onboarding.
Well, kids less than 2 know how to pick up an iPad these days. And
yeah, that's true. That's very true.
We're all trainable.
We're trainable.
It's slowly becoming part of our DNA. Cool. We got a question from Michael. How do you see WebXR and WebAR playing out on the Vision Pro? Will Apple continue to keep it deprecated, and push developers to build apps, even though Safari will probably be the #1 app on the device?
Yeah. I mean, that's right in your wheelhouse, Tom. I'll give that one to you.
I was going to say, Amy, do you want to? Well, we all know that on the Apple Vision Pro, Safari does support WebXR, and that's a big win. That being said, the immersive VR experience is what's available to users, and it's only available to users after turning on an experimental flag. And we saw, that we've seen some really cool articles actually highlight WebXR and the use of WebXR on Apple Vision Pro. Escape Artist is an experience that you can try out today. It's a really compelling one that you can try in VR via the browser on a MetaQuest device and Apple Vision Pro. And so my hope is that we'll continue to see developers really prove how powerful and accessible web content is. And the more web content that exists, I believe the more the browser will continue to evolve and advance. On the flip side, you looking at the MetaQuest device, I do want to really highlight the great work that the Meta team has put into the MetaQuest browser, which has full, immersive VR and immersive AR mode. And in fact, in mixed reality in the browser, you're able to go well beyond hit test to, access the mesh, semantic labels. They have an other experimental APIs that they've been working on, and so there's some exciting things that are happening in the headset space for the browser.
Awesome. Got a question from Vedika. How do you anticipate the integration of smart glasses like Meta Ray-Bans, or better yet, the brilliant frames into everyday life and work environments?
Amy, you want to start on that one?
Well, I mean, I think this is the ideal, right? Like this is where we all want to eventually get to, where we don't ever have to look at a screen again. And to do that, it needs to be as light as Meta Ray-Bans. But I do think we're, quite a few years from that, and there's a lot of opportunity between now and then. So, and a lot of, development. You look at something like the Bose AR glasses that are, wow, they're like 5 years ago now, which were, really great for a first gen. How do you wear a pair of glasses and have some sort of a spatial audio context, at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing that expand for visual. Obviously there was Google Glass a long time ago, so this is a different version of that. But I'm actually really excited about the Ray-Bans. I'm really interested to see how the AI integrates with it as they start to release more functionality with it. And I think it'll be a different set of experiences than what you have on the Vision Pro and the MetaQuest. And, but the whole point is that it's more wearable and, can actually be out and about on a street versus, that's not what Vision Quest is built for. Yeah,
and it really is like showing the breadth of spatial computing. I think that's what, as you pointed out, it's different, right? It's still in spatial computing in that, Meta Ray-Bans have a camera, though that camera is a sensor. That sensor is perceiving the world, and the understanding and the awareness of that perceiving of the world is being fueled by multimodal AI. And so, but yet there is no, visual AR. It's a different experience. It may be, more assistive, like we're seeing with frames, where you can see text in front of your eyes, or it's more like augmented audio, where you're getting that visual, that virtual smart assistant in your ear. For me, I think the big step change is multimodal AI, like large language models, large action models, large visual models, vision models, like this is a game changer for wearable technology. And it really is giving that contextual computing ingredient that has been missing with those types of wearables. And so, I think if you recall back to 2012, 2013, like a lot of wearable ideas, I think those ideas are starting and will continue to come back. But they will come back with like new new lease on life because they'll make more sense now with multimodal AI.
Game changer for spatial computing, but also game changer for AI, because the more that you're entering more information into the system, that, right, again, if it can use it, then you're getting that language model is being built out even more. So here's another instance where that relationship between AR and spatial computing, or AI and spatial computing, is just going to accelerate each other, which is
100%. 100%. My favorite definition of spatial computing is allowing computers to understand, interact, and perceive space. And so like that is anything from an autonomous vehicle to a robot, through to the glasses we just talked about, and Apple Vision Pro and Meta Quest. And so it is this next wave all coming together, and I think that's really exciting.
When we first launched WXR and we would talk about spatial computing, we had to clarify to investors that we weren't talking about outer space.
That's funny. Or are you?
I'm thrilled that more people are understanding spatial with a T.
That's hilarious.
So we have a question from Spatial Tests. What's the best Gaussian splatting demo you've seen in VR, if any, at this point?
I mean, I'm going to think.
I haven't seen any.
I've had a couple of really cool experiences with places. So I'm not quite sure if this question from Spatial Test is like, what is that place or what is the object that you've experienced? But I will say, just in general, it is really very cool to have something that has existed and does exist in the real world be quickly replicated and brought into the virtual space. And the experience is like talking about the experience, all of the experiences that I've had with Gaussian Splat is about this idea of like reliving memory in a way, kind of like spatial video from as Apple Vision Pro, where like I'm put back in that place at that moment because it's captured. It's not just a captured place, but it's a captured place at that time. And so I think it's quite interesting to have that experience. One of my very first experiences in VR was sitting in a Flickr photo, which is just like a panoramic photo. That flashback, I had a flashback to that when I went into panorama photos that I had captured over the course of years with my iPhone in the Apple Vision Pro. And then fast forward to this question around Gaussian splats, which really allow for a high fidelity, 3D media capture. Now you're able to more fully experience that moment as if you were really like back there. So that's my favorite part of the experience, is that reliving of the memory.
Yeah, I think that was one of your trends as well, or if not, I think that'll be a huge use case as it's easier to capture in 3D and not hold up your 360 Samsung device, or whatever the GoPro camera was that we used to have to do.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, like, I know that we always use Minority Report in our industry as a reference point, but that actually was one of the really compelling Minority Report use cases. If you recall, Tom Cruise like pulling out his little holographic slides to look at spatial videos using projection technology, not a headset, to reminisce about times with his wife and his child. And so I think people immediately get that. That's what videos and photos intrinsically are about today, and that's what new video and photo formats will be tomorrow. Just more immersive,
memory
more
capture.
present.
Yeah.
Nice one. All right, I think we've got time for just one more quick one. Let's go with Sheridan to close us out. What exciting trends have you seen in home care for wellness and health?
Do you want to start?
Gosh, so many, right? Like, I don't even, where do I even start? So again, I'll give the shout out to Embodied Labs, one of our companies. They've been in this space for a long time. They're doing healthcare for the aging population, and training in that space, but also, you know, all of the different wellness apps that we're seeing out there. I think it is fun. We shouted out Helium. There's Trip, which is a meditation app that I think is on the ABP now, definitely on the headset, and I think even on mobile. I think they're integrating AI, like they're doing all of it. You know, anything related. I can't remember if the question was home healthcare. I'm still really excited about things that can happen in the, you know, in the surgical space, to help the training and that in making surgeries more effective. If we went into AI, I could go on forever because I'm really excited about what AI is going to do with healthcare. But those are some of mine. How about you, Tom?
Yeah, I agree. I would +1 to the list that you gave. I will say that, you know, there are a good number of mental health apps on MR headsets. So like mental health and your fitness. I think those are two big trends for home care. Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, very good question.
All right. Well, I think that rounds out the show. Tom, Amy, thank you again for coming back. It's official. AWE Nite SF is off to the races. It doesn't get started until you guys come in. Yeah, thank you again for all of your time, all of your insights. I know the community definitely appreciates them. I do as well. And can't wait to see you all in AWE Long Beach.
Sounds great. Thanks for having
you.
us.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Take
Amy.
care.
Thanks again. Bye. Y'all. All right. I think that's